Whenever I am in this chapel and I look at the carved lectern and up at the slave gallery, I think of Pauli Murray. I'm Eileen McCorry, and I'm the president of the Reverend Dr. Pauli Murray Chapter of the Daughters of the King here at the Chapel of the Cross. Established on August 12, 2018 with 10 women, our chapter is a little over 2 years old and has grown to 14 members. The Daughters of the King are Christian women and girls between the ages of 7 and 107, both lay and ordained, who follow a rule of life every day. This rule of life consists of prayer, service, and evangelism. Each member's rule of life reflects her individual and unique spiritual journey and is developed prayerfully with God's guidance. The Daughters of the King is an international Christian order because of this rule of life. We don't just enroll as members and attend meetings. After a 3-month period of study and discernment, each new member takes vows to uphold the rules of life. When a daughter is admitted to the order, she receives the cross of the order. This cross is inscribed in Latin with words that mean, with heart, mind, and spirit, uphold and bear the cross. At the base of the cross are the letters FHS, for his sake, the opening of the motto of the order. By unanimous consent, the name of our chapter was chosen as the Reverend Dr. Pauli Murray Chapter. We chose this because of Dr. Murray's ancestral connections to the Chapel of the Cross and the example of her stellar life. Pauli Murray did so much and overcame deep prejudices, even though she was only one woman. She exemplifies the motto of the order. For his sake, I am but one, but I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. What I can do, I ought to do. What I ought to do, I will do by the grace of God. Lord, what will you have me do? So why are we telling the Pauli Murray story as part of the Telling Our Story series? Just what is her connection to the Chapel of the Cross and Chapel Hill? First, I'll talk a little bit about what did not connect her. She didn't live in Chapel Hill or attend the Chapel of the Cross. She was denied entry to the University of North Carolina because of her race. She was born in Baltimore, and after the death of her mother, she lived in Durham with her mother's family, the Fitzgeralds, and attended St. Titus Church in Durham and Hillside High School, at the time the high school for blacks in Durham. Her connection to Chapel Hill and to Chapel of the Cross is through her ancestors. Her grandmother was Cornelia Smith Fitzgerald. Cornelia was the daughter of a slave named Harriet, who was raped by James Sidney Smith. He was the brother of Mary Ruffin Smith. Her name is carved in Memorial Hall and at this lectern that was given in her honor. Mary acknowledged Cornelia and the other illegitimate children of James and his brother Frank. They lived with her on a plantation in Chapel Hill and were baptized at the Chapel of the Cross. Pauli Murray's accomplishments are too many to review in a short time, but here are a few. She moved to New York City to attend college. When she tried to enroll, first at Barnard College of Columbia University, and then at Hunter College of the City University of New York, she was told that she did not meet the entrance requirements. Because of the Jim Crow education of the time, she had only completed the 11 grades offered at Durham's Hillside High School. Undaunted, she moved in with family in the Richmond Hill section of the New York City Borough of Queens and enrolled at Richmond Hill High School for 12th grade to fulfill the requirements for admission to Hunter. She worked her way through Hunter and graduated from there and later from Howard University Law School, first in her class and the only female. In her final law school paper, she argued that segregation violated the 13th and 14th Amendments of the U.S. Constitution. In 1954, Thurgood Marshall used that paper in preparing arguments in Brown versus the Board of Education. She was denied entrance to Harvard Law School for graduate study because of her gender, but she did receive a JSD degree from Yale. She was a founding member of the National Organization for Women. She served on the National Board of Directors of the ACLU. She was a tenured professor of law and politics at Brandeis University. She articulated the intellectual foundations of two of the most important social justice movements of the 20th century. First, when she made her argument for overturning Plessy versus Ferguson, used in Brown versus the Board of Education, and later, when she co-wrote a law review article subsequently used by Ruth Bader Ginsburg to convince the Supreme Court that the Equal Protection Clause applies to women. In short, she was a poet, writer, activist, labor organizer, legal theorist, and Episcopal priest. At age 62, an age when many, if not most of us, are starting to think about retirement, she entered General Theological Seminary in 1973. Prior to the Episcopal Church's approval of women as candidates for ordination, and completed the Master of Divinity degree. In 1977, she became the first African-American female priest to be ordained in the Episcopal Church. At the invitation of Peter Lee, she celebrated her first Mass after ordination in the chapel. He had read in her book, Proud Shoes, the story of her Fitzgerald family and learned of her connection to Chapel Hill. He had found in the Chapel of the Cross register the record of grandmother Cornelia's baptism. In a chapter of her memoir, Song in a Weary Throat, entitled Full Circle, she wrote, 5 weeks later, meaning after her ordination, on the weekend of Abraham Lincoln's birthday, I traveled to North Carolina to celebrate my first Holy Eucharist, also the first Eucharist to be celebrated by a woman in that state, at the Chapel of the Cross in Chapel Hill. Family history and religious tradition combined with changing folkways to make it an occasion of high drama, which attracted not only the local media, but also Charles Kuralt of CBS, himself a graduate of the University of North Carolina, who came down with his on-the-road van and television crew from New York to cover the event. On Sunday, February 13th, in the little chapel where my grandmother Cornelia had been baptized more than a century earlier as one of 5 servant children belonging to Miss Mary Ruffin Smith, I read the gospel from an ornate lectern engraved with the name of that slave-owning woman who had left part of her wealth to the Episcopal Diocese of North Carolina. A thoroughly interracial congregation crowded the chapel, and many more stood outside until they could enter to kneel at the altar rail and receive communion. There was a great irony in the fact that the first woman priest to preside at the altar of the church to which Mary Ruffin Smith had given her deepest devotion should be the granddaughter of the little girl she had sent to the balcony reserved for slaves. But more than irony marked the moment. Whatever future ministry I might have as a priest, it was given to me that day to be a symbol of healing. All the strands of my life had come together. Descendant of slave and slave owner, I had already been called poet, lawyer, teacher, and friend. Now I was empowered to minister the sacrament of one in whom there is no north or south, no black or white, no male or female, only the spirit of love and reconciliation drawing us all toward the goal of human wholeness.